My fiancée slept with my father the night before our wedding, and I exposed them in front of all 150 guests at the ceremony. Let me paint you a picture of how perfect my life looked exactly 24 hours before I discovered a text message that would make me burn it all to the ground in the most public way possible. My name is Jonathan Clark. I'm 32 years old, and I had spent the last 8 years building what I thought was an unshakable foundation for my future. I was a senior project manager at a tech firm in Chicago, pulling in a comfortable six-figure salary, living in a nice apartment in Lincoln Park, and I was about to marry the woman I thought was the love of my life. Megan was everything I'd ever wanted, or at least that's what I told myself every single day for 3 years. She was smart, beautiful, came from a good family in Wisconsin, and she had this way of making everyone in a room feel like they were the only person that mattered. We met at a mutual friend's birthday party back in 2021, and I knew within 3 months that I wanted to spend the rest of my life with her. I proposed on a beach in Santa Barbara during sunset because I'm apparently that kind of guy who believes in fairy tale moments, and she said yes while crying happy tears that I genuinely believed were real. The wedding planning took over a year because Megan wanted everything to be perfect, and I mean everything. We had booked the Fourth Presbyterian Church on Michigan Avenue, one of the most beautiful churches in Chicago, and the reception was set for the Chicago Athletic Association Hotel with a view of Millennium Park. We had a videographer, a photographer who cost more than my first car, a string quartet, and a menu that had been taste tested for separate times. 150 guests were confirmed. The seating chart alone took 3 weeks to finalize, and my mother had cried twice just looking at Megan's dress during the final fitting. Now let me tell you about my father, Robert Clark, because understanding who he was makes what happened so much worse. My dad was 58 years old, a successful commercial real estate broker who had built his reputation on being trustworthy, dependable, and ethical. He was the kind of man who coached my little league team when I was 9, who taught me how to drive stick shift in an empty parking lot when I was 15, who helped me move into every apartment I'd ever rented, and who gave me advice about everything from career moves to how to treat the woman you love. My parents had been married for 35 years, and my father always told me that the secret to a good marriage was respect, communication, and never breaking trust. I believed every word he said because he was my hero, my mentor, and the standard I measured myself against. So when he offered to stay with me at the Palmer House Hotel the night before the wedding, I thought it was just another one of those father-son bonding moments that I'd remember forever. We checked into a suite on the 10th floor around 7 on Friday evening, and the plan was simple: order room service, maybe watch a game, talk about life, and get a good night's sleep before the biggest day of my life. My mother was staying with Megan and her bridesmaids at a different hotel downtown because apparently that's what tradition dictates, and honestly, everything felt exactly the way it was supposed to feel. We ordered steaks from the hotel restaurant, cracked open a bottle of scotch that my father had brought specifically for this occasion, and we sat there talking about marriage, responsibility, and what it means to build a life with someone. My father looked me in the eye and told me that I was making the right choice, that Megan was a wonderful woman, and that he was proud of the man I had become. I actually got a little emotional because this was one of those moments you think about for years afterward, one of those memories that's supposed to define your relationship with your parent. We talked until about 10:30, and then my father said he needed to use the bathroom before bed. He left his phone on the coffee table between us, face up, because why wouldn't he? He had nothing to hide, or at least that's what I thought until the screen lit up with a notification that made my entire world collapse in on itself. The message was from Megan, and I saw it clear as day because the preview showed up right there on the lock screen. Last night was unforgettable, Robert. I can't stop thinking about you. My brain couldn't process it at first because those words didn't make any sense in the context of my reality. I picked up his phone, my hands shaking, and I opened the message thread because I needed to understand what the hell I was looking at. There were messages going back 3 weeks, dozens of them, and they were exactly what you think they were. But the worst part, the part that made me feel like I was drowning in the middle of that hotel room, was the photo attached to that message. It was Megan and my father in a bed I didn't recognize, and the timestamp showed it was taken Thursday night, less than 24 hours ago. They had been together the night before while I was at my bachelor party with my friends, celebrating what I thought was the beginning of my new life. I sat there staring at that phone for what felt like an hour, but was probably only 90 seconds, and I went through every emotion a human being can experience in that short span of time. Rage, betrayal, disbelief, nausea, and then something else entirely, something cold and calculated that I didn't even know existed inside me. I heard the bathroom door open, and my father walked out asking me something about whether I wanted to watch the highlights from the Cubs game. And I just looked at him with this completely neutral expression and said, "Yeah, sure." I didn't scream. I didn't throw the phone at his face. I didn't even let my voice shake. I opened my laptop, connected to the hotel Wi-Fi, and I forwarded every single message and photo from his phone to my email address while he was pouring himself another drink. Then I uploaded everything to 3 separate cloud storage accounts because I'm a project manager and redundancy is how I operate. I took screenshots of the metadata, the timestamps, everything that could possibly be used as evidence, and I organized it all into a folder labeled Wedding Documents because apparently I have a dark sense of humor even in crisis mode. My father had no idea what I had just discovered because I'm apparently very good at compartmentalizing when I need to be, and we actually went to bed like nothing had happened. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, listening to him snore in the other bed, and I planned exactly what I was going to do. I could have called off the wedding right then, could have confronted both of them in the middle of the night, could have made a scene that would have been private and contained, but that's not what I wanted. See, I wanted everyone to know exactly who these people were. I wanted the truth to be undeniable and public, and I wanted them to experience a fraction of the humiliation they had earned. So I got up at 3 in the morning, went into the bathroom with my laptop, and I built a simple web page using a free hosting service. I uploaded every message, every photo, every piece of evidence with timestamps and context, and I created a QR code that linked directly to that page. Then I designed 200 small cards that said, "Scan for a special surprise from the bride and groom," and I formatted them to look elegant, like they were part of the official wedding materials. I found a 24-hour print shop in downtown Chicago, drove there at 4 in the morning while my father slept, paid extra for rush service, and I had those cards printed on nice cardstock with a glossy finish. I even called my lawyer at 6 in the morning, woke her up, explained the situation, and asked point blank if what I was planning was legal. She told me that as long as the information was true and I wasn't making threats or causing direct physical harm, I was within my rights to share factual information about people who had wronged me, especially in a context where their character was directly relevant to the assembled guests. The sun came up on my wedding day, and I went back to the hotel room where my father was just waking up, completely oblivious to the fact that his entire life was about to implode in the most spectacular fashion imaginable. The morning of my wedding day started with my father knocking on the bathroom door asking if I wanted to grab breakfast in the hotel restaurant. And I looked at myself in the mirror wondering how I was managing to keep my face so calm when everything inside me felt like it was burning. I told him I'd meet him downstairs in 20 minutes, and I used that time to transfer the stack of printed QR cards from my car into a manila envelope that I labeled Programs. Give to Janet. Because Janet was our venue coordinator and she had no idea she was about to become an unwitting accomplice in the most spectacular wedding implosion Chicago had seen in years. I got dressed in dark jeans and a white button-down, went downstairs, and sat across from my father while he ate scrambled eggs and bacon, talking about how excited he was for today, how beautiful the ceremony was going to be, and how proud he was that I had found someone like Megan. I watched him lie to my face with such practiced ease that I realized this probably wasn't the first time he had done something like this, and I wondered how many other things in my life had been carefully constructed illusions designed to hide who he really was. My phone buzzed with a text from Megan saying, "I can't wait to marry you today. I love you so much." And I stared at those words for a long moment before responding with, "Love you too. See you at the altar." Because I'm apparently just as capable of playing this game as they were. I drove back to my apartment around 10 in the morning to pick up my tuxedo, and my best man called me asking if I was nervous, if I needed anything, if he should come over and keep me company before we headed to the church. I told him I was fine, that I just needed a couple hours to myself to process everything, and he laughed and said that was totally normal for grooms on their wedding day. If he only knew what I was actually processing, he would have driven over immediately and either talked me out of what I was planning or helped me make it even more devastating. I'm honestly not sure which. I laid out my Tom Ford tuxedo on the bed, the one I had spent $2,000 on because Megan insisted we needed to look perfect in the photos, and I felt absolutely nothing looking at it. I ironed my shirt with mechanical precision, tied my bow tie in the mirror, and I looked like exactly what I was supposed to be. A successful, handsome groom about to marry the woman of his dreams at one of the most prestigious churches in the city. The only difference was that I knew the truth, and in about 4 hours, everyone else would know it too. I arrived at Fourth Presbyterian Church at 2:30 in the afternoon, 90 minutes before the ceremony was scheduled to start, and the first person I saw was Janet, our coordinator, who was running around with a clipboard making sure every detail was executing perfectly. I walked up to her with my most genuine smile and handed her the envelope of QR cards. And I told her these were special surprise programs that the bride and groom wanted distributed to every guest as they arrived. She looked at them, commented on how elegant and professional they were, and said she'd make sure her team placed one on every seat in the church. I thanked her, told her she was doing an amazing job, and I watched her walk away carrying the envelope that contained 200 doorways to the truth that would destroy 2 lives in the next 90 minutes. My groomsmen started arriving around 3, 5 guys I'd known since college, and my younger brother who was serving as my best man, and they were all in high spirits, joking around, taking selfies, completely unaware that they were about to witness something that would make them question everything they thought they knew about loyalty and family. My mother showed up at 3:15 looking absolutely radiant in her mother-of-the-groom dress, an elegant navy blue gown that she had picked out months ago specifically for this day. And she hugged me so tight that I almost broke down and told her everything right then and there. But I didn't, because she deserved to know the truth the same way everyone else was going to learn it. And I couldn't risk her trying to stop what was about to happen or inadvertently warning my father. She told me I looked so handsome, that she was so happy for me, and that she couldn't wait to officially welcome Megan into our family. I kissed her on the cheek and told her I loved her, and I meant it with every fiber of my being, because she was the only truly innocent person in this entire nightmare. My father arrived at 3:30 wearing his own tuxedo, looking distinguished and proud, and he clapped me on the shoulder and asked me how I was holding up with all the pre-wedding nerves. I looked him directly in the eyes and said, "I'm ready for everyone to see the truth today." And he smiled and nodded because he thought I was talking about committing to Megan in front of our community, when I was actually talking about exposing him as the fraud he was. Guests started filing into the church around 3:45, and I watched from a side room as Janet's team efficiently handed out the QR cards to every single person who walked through those massive doors. My aunt and uncle from Denver, Megan's college roommates, my colleagues from work, my mother's book club friends, distant cousins I hadn't seen in 5 years. Everyone received one of those innocent-looking cards that said, "Scan for a special surprise from the bride and groom." I had timed this perfectly because I knew that people would start scanning them out of pure curiosity while they waited for the ceremony to begin, and I needed that information to spread through the church like wildfire before I made my move. At 4 o'clock sharp, 15 minutes before the ceremony was supposed to start, I heard the first audible gasp from inside the church. Then another. Then whispered conversations that grew louder and more urgent with each passing minute. I watched through a crack in the door as people huddled together looking at their phones with expressions of absolute shock, as faces went pale, as some people started crying, and as the atmosphere inside that beautiful Gothic church transformed from joyful anticipation into horrified disbelief. My mother was sitting in the front row on the right side, and I saw the exact moment when someone showed her their phone, probably my aunt who was sitting directly next to her. Her face literally crumbled like a building collapsing in slow motion, and she turned around looking for my father with an expression of such profound betrayal that I had to look away because it hurt too much to watch. My father was standing near the back of the church greeting late arrivals and shaking hands, completely oblivious to the fact that his entire world was disintegrating around him, until one of his business partners grabbed his arm with an urgent grip and showed him something on his phone. I watched my father's face cycle through confusion, recognition, and then pure animal panic in about 5 seconds flat, and he immediately started looking around desperately trying to find me. The church that had been filled with happy chatter and laughter 10 minutes ago was now eerily quiet except for frantic whispered conversations and the occasional sob, and I knew with absolute certainty that it was time to finish what I had started. The officiant walked up to me at 4:10 looking genuinely concerned and asking if we should delay the start of the ceremony, because something seemed very wrong with the guests, and I told him to proceed exactly as planned, because everything was actually going perfectly according to my plan. The music started right on schedule, the bridesmaids began their processional down the aisle in their champagne-colored dresses, and I walked out to take my position at the altar in front of 150 people who were all staring at me with expressions ranging from profound pity to shock to morbid curiosity about what I was going to do next. My father tried to approach me from his seat in the front row, probably to warn me or beg me to stop whatever he thought was coming. But my uncle physically blocked him with an arm across his chest and told him in a voice loud enough for nearby guests to hear that he needed to sit down and shut up. I watched my dad sink back into the pew next to my mother, who wouldn't even look in his direction. Her body turned away from him like he was something toxic she couldn't bear to be near. Then the wedding march began playing. Those familiar notes that are supposed to fill everyone with joy and anticipation. And the doors at the back of the church opened to reveal Megan in her $10,000 Vera Wang dress, looking absolutely stunning and completely unaware that she was walking into an ambush. She had this huge, radiant smile on her face as she walked down that aisle on her father's arm, nodding at guests and glowing with what seemed like genuine happiness. And I found myself wondering how someone could compartmentalize their life so effectively that they could betray someone on Thursday night and then marry them on Saturday afternoon without showing a single crack in their facade. She reached the altar. Her father kissed her cheek and symbolically handed her over to me with tears in his eyes, and she took my hands while looking into my eyes with what appeared to be genuine love and excitement. The officiant began the ceremony with the standard traditional opening about how we were gathered here today to witness the union of two people in holy matrimony, and I let him talk for about 90 seconds before he got to the part that I had been waiting for my entire life. He asked the traditional question, the one that's mostly ceremonial in modern weddings because nobody ever actually objects anymore. And he said in his formal pastoral voice, "If anyone here knows of any lawful reason why these two should not be married, speak now or forever hold your peace." The church went completely silent, so silent that you could literally hear people breathing and the faint sound of traffic outside. And I raised my hand slowly like I was in a classroom asking for permission to speak. The officiant looked genuinely confused. Megan's face went from happy to concerned in an instant, and I gently let go of her hands and turned to face the entire congregation of people who had come here to celebrate what they thought was going to be the happiest day of my life. I didn't yell, I didn't cry, I didn't let my voice shake even a little bit. I just spoke in a clear, calm, almost conversational voice that carried through that entire Gothic church, and I said, "I have a very good reason why this wedding cannot continue. And I think most of you already know exactly what it is based on what you've seen on your phones in the last 20 minutes. Megan grabbed my arm hard and whispered urgently, "What are you doing, Jonathan?" And I looked at her and said loud enough for the front rows to hear, "I'm telling the truth, something you apparently forgot how to do." I turned back to face the guests and continued speaking, telling them in clear, simple terms that the woman standing next to me in a wedding dress had been having an affair with my father for at least 3 weeks, that they had been together Thursday night while I was at my bachelor party, and that I had discovered their betrayal less than 48 hours ago through a text message that my father was careless enough to leave visible on his phone. I told them that every message, every photo, every piece of evidence with full timestamps was available on the website they had all accessed through the QR codes, and that I wanted everyone here to understand exactly who they had been celebrating and supporting and what kind of people they actually were. My mother stood up abruptly and screamed at my father, her voice cracking with pain and rage as she asked him how he could do this, how he could destroy their marriage and their family and my life for something so selfish and disgusting. Megan's parents were sitting in the third row looking absolutely mortified, and her mother was openly crying while her father just sat there with his mouth hanging open like his brain couldn't process what was happening in real time. Megan tried desperately to defend herself, saying, "This isn't what it looks like. Please let me explain." But I cut her off immediately and said, "There are literally photos with timestamps. Megan, it's exactly what it looks like, and everyone here can see them." My father finally found his voice and stood up trying to apologize, saying, "Son, please, let's talk about this in private. We can work through this." And I actually laughed because the sheer audacity of asking for privacy after what he had done was almost impressive in its shamelessness. I told him that he had forfeited his right to privacy when he decided to sleep with my fiancée, and that he had forfeited his right to call me son when he betrayed every single value he had ever taught me about honor and integrity and loyalty. I took off my boutonniere very deliberately, set it on the altar like I was making a formal statement, and I told everyone in that church that this wedding was over, that my relationship with both Megan and my father was permanently finished, and that I sincerely hoped they would all enjoy the refreshments at the reception that was now canceled. I walked down that aisle with my head held high and my shoulders back, while behind me Megan collapsed sobbing into her father's arms. My father tried to follow me, but was physically restrained by multiple people, and my mother told him in a voice that echoed through the church that if he took one more step in my direction, she would make sure he regretted it for the rest of his miserable life. My brother caught up with me in the parking lot and asked me what I needed, and I told him the only thing I needed was for him to make sure mom was okay and had somewhere to stay tonight, because she was the only person in that church who deserved any compassion or support. I drove straight back to my apartment without looking back, changed out of my tuxedo, packed 2 suitcases with essentials, and I checked into a hotel near O'Hare Airport because I couldn't stand to be in that city for one more night. The story went viral within hours because of course it did, because when you expose a betrayal that publicly in the age of smartphones, someone is always going to record it or post about it on social media. I started getting calls from local news stations asking for interviews, from random people on the internet calling me either a hero or an idiot depending on their perspective and personal experiences, and from friends and family members who wanted to know if I was okay or if there was anything they could do to help me through this. I ignored most of them except for a confirming text from my lawyer stating that everything I had done was completely legal and that neither Megan nor my father had any grounds whatsoever to sue me for defamation, since everything I had shared was objectively true and provably documented. Megan lost her job at a marketing firm 2 weeks later because the company didn't want to be associated with the scandal and the negative publicity, and she ended up moving back to Wisconsin to live with her parents because her reputation in Chicago was completely destroyed and she couldn't find work anywhere in the city. My father's real estate business imploded even faster than I expected because his entire career had been built on a foundation of trust and personal integrity. And once his clients and colleagues found out what kind of person he really was, they dropped him immediately without hesitation. His business partner dissolved their partnership within a month, citing a specific breach of moral character clause that was actually written into their original contract. And my father went from being a successful, well-respected broker to basically unemployable in his field overnight. My mother filed for divorce after 35 years of marriage, and she told me on the phone through tears that she felt like she had wasted her entire adult life on a man who didn't deserve her loyalty or sacrifice. She got the house and the settlement, half of his retirement accounts, and a monthly alimony payment that ensured she'd be financially comfortable for the rest of her life. And honestly, that was the one genuinely good thing that came out of this entire nightmare. I quit my job in Chicago 3 months later and accepted a position at a tech startup in Austin, Texas, because I needed to start completely over in a place where nobody knew my story and I could just be Jonathan Clark, the project manager, instead of Jonathan Clark, the guy from that viral wedding disaster that everyone had seen online. The change of scenery and climate helped more than I expected it to, and I threw myself completely into work on AI projects that were actually interesting and challenging enough to keep my mind occupied and prevent me from dwelling on what had happened. I started dating again about 8 months after the wedding that never was, but I took it extremely slowly and carefully because my ability to trust people had been fundamentally damaged by what Megan and my father had done to me. My father tried to reach out several times through my brother over the following year, asking if we could meet face to face and talk, asking if there was any possible way to repair our relationship, and I finally agreed to see him once about a year after the wedding just to get closure. He apologized profusely. He cried. He told me that what he did was the biggest mistake of his entire life, and that he would do literally anything to earn my forgiveness and have me back in his life. I told him very calmly that I forgave him because holding on to anger and resentment was only hurting me and preventing me from moving forward. But that forgiveness didn't mean reconciliation, and I had absolutely no interest in having any kind of relationship with him going forward. He accepted that with what seemed like genuine understanding, and we haven't spoken since that meeting. As for Megan, I heard through mutual friends who still kept tabs on her that she and my father never actually continued their relationship after the wedding exposure, that whatever twisted thing they had between them fell apart as quickly as it had started once all the excitement and secrecy were gone and they had to face the real-world consequences. She's apparently engaged to someone else now, some guy from her hometown in Wisconsin, and I genuinely hope for his sake that she's learned something from what happened and become a better person, though I honestly have my doubts. My life now is better than it ever was before the wedding, not because of what happened to me, but because of who I became after surviving it and rebuilding myself from scratch. And looking back, I realized that wedding disaster was actually the beginning of the best and most authentic chapter of my entire life. What do you think about this story? Let me know in the comments, drop a like, and don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories.